Thank you for attending tonight's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. The agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. You may also follow along by connecting to the district's website at www.wcsoh.org. Click on our district link, then select Board of Education, and then Board Docs Agenda to select this evening's meeting. There will be two opportunities to address the board this evening, the first being Agenda Item 6.01. The first set of public comments is relative to Agenda Items 7.01 through 12.02. Please state the agenda items that you are referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is Agenda Item 13.01. There is a sign-up sheet located on the table in the back of the room. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. And with that, Mr. Griffith, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Cotter?
Here.
Mrs. Davidson?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mr. Villardo?
Here.
Mr. Byrd?
Here, if you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Again, welcome to tonight's board meeting. We will move directly into the agenda, and our first topic is district highlights and recognitions. We have none slated for this evening, so we will move to board meeting minutes. As a point of order, we do not vote on board meeting minutes. We simply approve the minutes from our prior meeting unless there are questions, issues, or concerns to be raised at this time. Hearing none, we will call the board meeting minutes approved and move to item 5, reports. 5.01, update on spring assessments.
Very good. Thank you. President Byrd, members of the board, Superintendent Kellogg, and Treasurer Griffith. It is my pleasure to talk tonight about the spring assessments that are coming up here for 2016. So what we want to do is highlight various assessments that are going to be occurring this spring, but I also want to mention publicly that last school year we did an assessment inventory, and that assessment inventory is on our district website, and it provides a one-page summary on every assessment that we have in our school district. And it's 26 pages long, and feel free to read it at your leisure. But tonight we're just going to focus on these assessments here. So the first one across all grade levels is the OELPA, the Ohio English Language Proficiency Assessment. That is a new term. In the past it was called the OTELA, but they've transitioned to now calling it the OELPA. And that is for all of our English language learners in grades K through 12. It will be taken online. Many of our assessments this year, as you're aware, we've been migrating towards taking them online. And this is yet another assessment that will be online starting in February and March is the test window, and it focuses on assessing reading, writing, speaking, and listening. The alternative assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities is also another assessment. That's for our students that are on IEPs, our special education students that specifically, it's written into their IEP that they are not going to be taking the Ohio state test, but this alternative state assessment. And the results of this does go into our district report card, and it does affect our performance index. And that, again, is across all grade levels. The next, in the elementary, I want to highlight the Terra Nova InView. The Terra Nova is an achievement test. The InView is an ability test. This, in the past, we have given this in grades 2 and 6, but at the same time, we've transitioned over the last 2 years to give this test in grades 2 and 5 only. One of the reasons why we were looking to do this in the elementary school, specifically in grade 5, is that this information will be utilized by our middle schoolers. So when our students transition to the middle school and we're looking at class placements, et cetera, we'll have that data going into 6th grade. In the past, it was given in the spring of 6th grade year, and really we needed it before our kids went on to the middle school. Along with the InView, though, know that parents will get a CSI score, cognitive scale index, which is like an IQ equivalent. And for our English language learners, in lieu of the end view, we want to level the playing field and make sure that we get quality results and we're able to inform our parents about students' achievement levels and their ability. We give the INAT. That is, again, in grades 2 and 5. So the INAT is in lieu of the in view. And those reports are also given to our parents. Here, about 2 weeks ago, I went over in 2 different parent meetings with our parents that speak English as a second language. And I'm very pleased to say we had tremendous turnout. It wasn't just because of that I was presenting, trust me. But it was really neat to be able to be there communicating to our English language learner parents. We had probably around 40 parents at each of these events. One was in the morning, one was held in the evening. And it truly looked like the United Nations because everyone had their headphones on. We had translators. 98% of the participants we had to translate for them, but we were able to translate in their native language. And we were able to break down assessments for them and communicate what we were doing with that. Also in the elementary, we have the Ohio State test. This is for students in grades 3 through 5. In the past, we've been transitioning to online. This year we will be fully online. We did give an online test in December for reading, which was a required assessment, and we'll be giving that again to our 3rd graders, a second opportunity for them to show proficient levels in reading because of the 3rd grade reading guarantee. You can also see the breakdown of the other assessments in grades 3, 4, and 5. Always focusing on English, language arts, mathematics, but at the same time in grade 4, social studies, and grade 5, we add science. In the middle school, we continue with the Ohio State tests, again taken online in April. Grade 6 is when we come back to social studies, and then in 8th grade, we add science back in there as well. So social studies and science is given at 2 different times between the elementary and middle school years. The Ohio graduation test, we are sunsetting that in our state, so this really affects our students that were slated to graduate in 2016 and 17. Students took this in October. They will take it again in March. Students must pass all 5 parts of the Ohio graduation test. However, there are some conditions in which they could pass 4 and not the 5th. There's a lot of, it could get really deep into that, but know that what we're doing with every student that has not passed the Ohio graduation test or tests, we are engaging them individually. We're developing plans for each of those students to ensure that they have every possibility to graduate within the parameters that we're able to by the Ohio Department of Education. I'll give you one example. Just recently, actually took effect January of this calendar year. Students that take the Ohio graduation test in March, they also have an opportunity that they could take the Ohio State test as yet another opportunity to show competency and proficiency. So, for example, if a student had not passed the science OGT, they could take the biology Ohio State test in April. If a student didn't pass the reading OGT, they could take the English 1 and/or English 2 Ohio State test. I only mention this because there's many opportunity and paths to graduation, and we are constantly looking and working with every student to match up what we can do to support them so that we can get them to graduate and go on for college and careers. The Ohio State test, that is taken in April. By the way, the Ohio graduation test is still paper pencil. I don't believe they'll transition because that is sunsetting to online, but the Ohio State test is taken online. Again, that'll be in April, and you can see the content areas there: geometry, algebra 1, English 1, English 2, American history, American government, and biology. Last year, the state started the sciences with physical science, but that was quickly replaced by biology. So while that's still on the books, that's an opportunity for kids that may have taken physical science in the past. They could take that physical science again, or they could also take the biology. So many options that our students have to graduate. And it's our job, we feel, to make sure that we inform our parents as well as our students what those options are. As part of the online assessments, we need to make sure that our infrastructure is ready. So we have a real-time technology analysis being performed this Friday, February 26th. We've communicated this out via email to our staff members on a couple of different occasions. We've also sent this out one call now in our district through Greg Vibrand's office. And we're actually going to reduce streaming video and audio, as well as turn off our guest network so that we can do a real-time technology analysis during the school day to replicate what we'll be doing the day of our online assessments. We're going to be testing between 2,000 and 4,500 students all at one time during different parts when we're testing online. We need to make sure our infrastructure, our web interface is ready for that load. And this is just one way in which we're being proactive and taking steps to do that. Also, it's always wonderful to partner with our parent groups, and this is an example. We're partnering with Parent Council, and on Tuesday, March the 15th, from 6:30 to 8 at Westerville Central High School, we're going to be providing our parents an opportunity to come and learn about not only the assessments, but when they get the reports, what they mean. So I'll be facilitating that, and I plan to break down actually more from my perspective as a parent's perspective, that when I get these reports, what am I zeroing in on to learn about my student? These parent reports, there is so much information that's contained within them, and they can be very overwhelming. And I want to zero in, again, it's from my perspective, but as the Director of Assessment, I get that opportunity, I guess. I'm going to zero in specifically on what I look for and suggest to parents what they look for as well. So that'll be that opportunity on March the 15th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. And information has gone out on that through press releases. We have it in newsletters. Hopefully tonight we'll get some more attention with all the people that watch this on our cable television. And also, but you can go online and register. Yes, you can just show up, but it would be helpful if we knew how many people were coming so that we don't produce too many handouts. And also expect to know how many are coming. We have an opportunity to register through Google Forms we're using for that. So with that, that is Spring 2016 assessment. And yes, I can go over it in 5 minutes. You realize, of course, how much time it took to get us to this point.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Any questions? Clarification?
Last year, we had a lot of discussion around the assessments, and I want to let you know how much I appreciate the time you spent talking about that. I also really appreciate that 26-page document. This sounds really geeky, but it's hanging on my fridge. Yeah, my family walks in and says, why? But it matters to me, thank you. What are the biggest differences that you see in a nutshell for our kids and our families from last year? What would you say are the biggest differences?
Well, the biggest difference is the fact that we're going to be transitioning to online. But you know, the thing that I celebrate the most is the state figured out that 2 different assessment windows doesn't work. That they've narrowed it. We've reduced the amount of time that our students are going to be testing. And specifically, across all grade levels, the ability for us to focus on what we do really well, and that's instruct our students. And yes, we will assess them. But we're going to do that one time during the year for the state, and that's in April.
Thank you, Scott.
And I'm going to follow up by saying the biggest struggle has been getting the results from last year to match up between the first and the second test administration.
Really?
Yeah, and we're still working on that. We're getting closer to kind of finalizing that. But I will celebrate, now I'm going to come back to the celebration, we had 0 discrepancies in the past 2 test administrations in December and in our high school assessments that we performed. So the grade 3 and the high school assessments, 0 discrepancies. When we got everything back and narrowed down what we could, we had over 300 from last school year. And this year we have 0. So I think
That's great.
there's a lot of things going right for us with that, and hopefully we'll have 0 after this next round.
Any additional questions? If not, the only remark that I would make is I'm glad that we're getting out ahead of the curve and stress testing our environment for the load of online testing. Great forward thinking, excellent planning to do that. I really think that we're going to have gains in productivity and efficiency by being, almost completely online. We know that we would have situations where a paper test is needing to be administered for, whatever the situation may be for the student. But the vast majority online, I think, is going to be a huge time savings for teachers and students as well. So I'm glad that we're getting a chance to see if our infrastructure is ready for it before we get to the testing window.
Our teaching and learning roadmap that we've been working off of for the last, 2.5, 3 years has put us in a position that we are now where we have the number of devices for us to even move forward with that. So it's a credit to our organization, I believe, that we are at this point. We've gone from 0 Chromebooks to, I believe, almost 7,000 in a very short amount of time. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't know how much we can push the assessment literacy night for parents, but whatever we can do to push that, encourage people to attend, that would be, I think, hugely helpful, because I think your comment, I think we'd agree, the comment when we get these in the mail, there really is a lot of information there. And if you and your team that night can help parents, here, look for these pieces. You can read the whole thing, do read the whole thing, but look for these pieces. So I just thought it, I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the update. We'll move on to the next agenda item, reports 5.02, update on the Westerville South Marquee. Jeff? Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. This presentation is just to give you an update as to where we are with the design process, as well as a history of how we got to this point. So the original sign that was there, we actually went, before my time, but went for a variance with the city that got approved. At that time, code was allowing 15 square feet for the changeable portion copy of the sign, as well as school identification. It was everything identified with the sign less the piers. So it was 15 square feet. At that time, the district was asking for 32 square feet, and the variance was approved at 25 square feet. So as it was built, the changeable copy portion, as well as the signage that said Wildcat Country, was 25 square feet. Back in 2010, South had requested a new sign, an electronic sign. So there was a variance that was submitted. After discussions with the city in 2010, that variance went in 2011. In 2012, after, again, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes discussion with this. This is just an abbreviated timeline. But in 2012, there was a presentation to Planning Commission, who requested that it go to City Council. So later that year, it was presented to City Council, and City Council had requested that in lieu of a variance, could they have the opportunity to look at the current code and explore revising the code versus the variance. So that's where that presentation ended, and there were several years before anything really happened. In the meantime, the sign, the existing sign, was literally falling apart. We were looking to renovate the sign, just doing some repairs, and as we got into the repair work, the piers just started falling down. So it got to where the decision was made, we're just going to tear the sign down. We met with the city again in January of 2015, and through discussions, it was suggested that there was a Supreme Court ruling that they were waiting on to determine what they may be able to do with current code. They suggested if we could give them till the summer. So the Supreme Court did rule. They've shared that it wasn't a favorable ruling for the changes in the sign code. So where we were at was They were going to look at it, weren't quite sure how long that would take, a year plus. So we started working on a design that meets current code, and that's where we are today. A little bit of background in terms of the other schools. Central High School, it is a digital sign, but it's in a different jurisdiction. So it's not Westerville. The city of Westerville, Delaware does allow digital. The changeable copy portion of the sign is 23 square feet. It's 6 feet high. North High School is a manual copy sign. Again, the changeable copy, the portion of the sign we're actually changing the letters out is 23 square feet. And the height ranges anywhere from 8 feet, and it tips up at the point to 9 feet. The old sign at South, again manual, was 21 square feet with the changeable copy portion 7 feet high. And with current code, and this is the big hiccup with this, the changeable copy portion of the sign is allowed to be 10 square feet and 6 feet high. So we've come up with a couple design options working with the city of Westerville. This one resembles the former sign. So it's got the changeable copy sign. You see 2 by 5, 10 square feet. The portion where it says Westerville South, that used to be where the Wildcat Country portion of the sign was. And then 2, we have added the IB logo. We've had some feedback from the community to identify the school as an IB school. So this is option A. Option B, same thing in terms of specifications, 6 feet high, 2 by 5 in terms of the changeable copy portion. This sign design is more like what you see at North High School with the size of the lettering and identifying the high school. So this is the former sign at South. Again, that changeable copy portion, 21 square feet. And this is just giving you an indication of where we were, so that that gold area is sizing what was there in terms of changeable copy. And per code, we have designed 2 by 5, the 10 square feet limitation. So you can see it's much smaller than what we had before. This is North High School. Again, that changeable copy portion is 23 square feet. That tip is 9 feet. So it does not meet current code. And then, as I said, Westerville Central, a different jurisdiction. This is an electronic sign. The changeable, the digital portion is 23 square feet, and as I understand it, this was installed with donations that the school received. So I think they had some volunteers actually build the brick piers and worked with Daktronics to set the electronic portion in. These are just some examples of other digital signs throughout the country. That particular inset is the same one that is at Westerville Central. So it's the brick piers, the high school identifier at the header, but that's going to be a much bigger sign than what we could currently put in with current code. Again, just some other examples through the country: brick piers, school identifier, digital inset. Same thing, just different designs with brick piers. These get a little more creative in terms of design, but again, it's just some of the more extremes you see out there with the digital signs for high schools. I just found one that actually referenced the changeable copy size, so that's 21 square feet, where it's the Go Cardinals portion. These are probably more on the extreme side, but I'm just sharing what's happening out there. So where we're at is we have the 2 designs that we know we can do, and we can build those. Would not require a variance. Any changes, would be susceptible to taking it to, whether that's the Board of Zoning Appeals, whether that's Planning Commission, City Council, and requesting a variance as to whether we would get one. It would be up to that particular organization. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Jeff. Much appreciated. Questions, comments?
Just an additional piece, Jeff. We have met with the city regarding the issue, and the request was, would we be able to design something under current code that would start as analog, and then be able to retrofit back to digital when the city felt sign codes were aligned. And we had said we'd be willing to entertain that, but I think what we're finding is, as you can see, even if you convert that 2x5 to digital, it's still 10 square feet, and compared to the other signs we're seeing, it's just not really, doesn't say we're here. So that's kind of where we're at, current condition.
So the code issue, is it just the size of the sign, or is the digital piece against the current code as well?
Digital piece is not allowed currently. And I know that would be a much more difficult variance approval from what I'm hearing from the city versus possibly variances with changing the size of the manual copy portion. And that came through today based on your email.
I didn't see the response, so I must.
It was a phone call to me. So could we work with you on the size of the manual copy portion?
Do you know which entity at the city we would have to go to for a variance?
The phone call today was if we would be willing to work with them on possibly changing the manual copy portion of the sign. They said it still would have to be approved by, they were telling me it would be the Board of Zoning Appeals. Now, again, when I went the electronic, asking for the electronic variance, this was back in 2012. It first went to Planning Commission. Planning Commission suggested we go to City Council. But I don't think anyone really knew what to do because current code doesn't allow what we were asking for. And they were, at that time, they were looking at changing the code versus granting a variance. It doesn't sound like changing the code is going to happen anytime in the near future.
No, I'm not going to get it.
Do you understand the Supreme Court ruling? Should I?
I think it would be a good idea to touch on that, because I think it is important to note that this was not a Supreme Court ruling against the city of Westerville. This applies to other municipalities like Westerville's. So, yeah, touch on the Supreme Court ruling.
Their concern was that if they granted something special for the schools, the Supreme Court ruling was more about what's good for one is good for all. So it was felt that they would have to grant that for all the other entities. Now, there seems to be opportunities that are possibilities to make something work. For example, one thing that was mentioned to us when we met was it could be that you could put a grant a limitation for the size of the property. So let's say if it's 10 acres or greater, the possibility of an electronic sign, which would limit, you're treating all the entities fairly, it's just you've got to be 10 acres or greater, something like that.
So how did St. Paul's get a sign?
St. Paul's, as well as McDonald's, as I understand it, were pilot programs years ago that were to be reviewed to make a determination if it was something that they wanted to do in terms of making changes. But it's also my understanding that the review of those pilots, I don't believe that happened.
Well, the Supreme Court case also intervened.
Yeah, the Supreme Court case is significant in that actually, if you followed it, as goofy as this might sound, it was cited as one of the most, in this last round of decisions, the most influential decision that nobody paid attention to. And that every municipality across the country is having to re-examine their codes for signs. And this, for people working that field, is a huge, huge thing. And so it's a bigger than anybody really anticipated. And so that's what's making this a little bit tricky. And so whatever past practices may have happened in the way that is done, the city is staring at having to rewrite all of that code. And so to make any exceptions prior to, I think is what they're dealing with, is how do we deal with this in this no man's land between where we are and where we need to be? But we also think it represents an opportunity to work with the city on providing some definition around what the expectations of new code might be for something like this when you're talking about something you see across the country, and that we could do. So even the notion of expanded space for the analog versus just moving to digital that could effectively be static for long time periods, have regulation regarding illumination, have regulation regarding how frequently, whether or not it's scrolling or not. You can do all those pieces in electronic sign, and later from that, depending on the electronic sign, if you have more leeway, change that. But things like color, the illumination, whether or not the message is digital and static versus scrolling, all of that could be dealt with up front. But I'm not a Supreme Court justice, so I can't argue the case, but
There's an opening.
I'm just a simple superintendent who looks at it. So we'll go back to the sign, and Jeff's worked with them, and we've offered to be flexible in that way. The feeling right now is, other than the late phone call today, 2x5 is just, nobody will know you're there.
The changeable portion and the changeable portion on north is 23 square feet, correct?
That's
I just
correct.
want to make sure I'm reading my little chart here, right? And the new for south would be 10 square feet. The
Correct.
digital, right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. The digital central, 23. So the size, central north, the same right now. The old or the new, south, smaller. New, significantly smaller. And yet, in 11, we asked for a variance, and the variance was suggested in 12 to go to Planning Commission. I'm not saying that this is the most important issue the city is facing, but in my desire to see all three high schools feel some pride and passion in their appearance, their curb appeal, it seems to me that a 2x5, a 2x5 is really just not something we would want to accept. And
I think when you look at it in a sketch, it looks decent. I think it's really when you compare it to
Yes.
what we had is
yes.
significant change.
And I don't bang on people when they're making decisions like we try to make decisions. I don't want all kinds of crazy signs in our area. But it just feels like to me that this is an awfully long, drawn-out process, Supreme Court or not. And if you have to ask for a variance before a new code is written or in the old code, it seems to me, really, I'm not the sharpest knife when I'm looking at this, but it seems to me that it's a little hurtful toward the students, teachers, staff at South. I don't think intentionally. But I think when we're looking at our facilities, that is one thing, that's one of the pieces that we want the students to be proud of. And so all I'm saying is, I'm not sure the end of what I'm saying, right? Am I just saying, go back and ask for a variance? Am I saying, it is just inappropriate? 2 by 5, the former was 3/8, 5 by 8. It doesn't make sense to me. My concern, then I'm going to be quiet for a little while. My concern is that if we go, what do you call it? Analog. Okay. Sticking the letters on. And say, okay, down at the size that a digital could go in. Is that just sloughing it off? When would that likely happen? I don't know that you know the answer to that question. You understand, I'm just kind of, I think the students at South deserve to have as much pride in their facility as our other schools. And if we can help that facility, which is the one that needs the most support out of our 3 high schools, to help the students, the teachers, and staff walk in and feel good about what we're trying to do in their building, I think it's a legitimate thing to fight for.
I'm also in favor of pursuing a variance. I think that not only having similar facilities available to all our students, but also keeping the community located close to Westerville South informed of events and activities, you just can't do as much with a manual sign. Guessing we probably have a variance for Westerville North High School to have the larger sign. And I think that if we did get the variance, it wouldn't set a precedent and put the city in a uncomfortable position, because each variance is based on that property and that property's issues. So those are my thoughts.
Just to make sure I understand, so as we're talking about the variance, it's not just the variance of increasing the size of the sign. Is it also including the digital component?
I'm definitely in favor of the digital component also.
I am too. I think we should respectfully apply for a variance and go for digital. And I actually, this has been weighing heavy on my heart, as you know. I looked up some things online, some quotes from kids in different communities, how they feel about their sign. And I thought one of the things, one of the things that we work really hard at, and Greg Vibrance does such a fantastic job, is communicating. And I think we've gotten so much better at that, and what a great way to communicate with our community, especially community members that aren't in our schools, of letting them know what is happening in our schools. It's a glimpse inside of our schools just by driving by. And I think that's huge, a huge part of us all feeling part of Westerville. So here's another thing. We don't recognize our students, our teachers, and our school achievements nearly enough in my mind. I like that it would let us know about school functions, sporting events, special occasions. It can promote fundraisers, special events, and our volunteers and our sponsors that hang with us all the time, which they are here in our community. It's interesting to me. I'm going to put Richard on the spot a little bit, being a parent at Central. You know, I've talked to a couple of the parents there, just the pride, the kids, when it's graduation time, they go up and stand by the sign, and the name goes across, and they're taking pictures. I mean, that's the only time you're going to be up in lights, probably. So, you know, I think we have a good relationship with our city. I think once they hear us and hear the community, because I think now the community is probably going to start talking about it a little bit more, they'll partner with us in a respectful way, and we'll get this done for the kids. So,
I'm in favor of a variance, and I'm looking at it in a couple of ways. I'm in favor of a larger sign and a larger sign that's digital. However, understanding the ramifications of the Supreme Court decision and the realities that the city is facing, I also want us to, and I know you have done this, but I want to do this in a little bit more persistent way with our other partners too, perhaps, seek to assist the city as they look at ways to develop sign code that would allow differences based on such factors as acreage. You know, what can we do to help with that? It isn't that I want us just to pound our fists on the table and say, well, we want a sign like Central sign. Yeah, I do want a sign like Central sign for both north and south, but I also want to do that within the respectful partnership that we have with the city, and I want to do that in a way that helps them deal with the situation that they have to deal with. They have not chosen to have to redo all their sign codes, and if we can help them with that, I want us to do that. In the meantime, I want to pursue a variance. If that variance doesn't work, I want to pursue another variance. I want to keep going until we get the signage issues dealt with.
I'm a little less sympathetic about the Supreme Court case, and the reason is that, you know, the bench of the Supreme Court made a decision to accept that case in 2014. By that time, we had already been spinning on this subject for 4 years. In fact, the Supreme Court could have made a decision not to accept that case in the 2014 session, and there wouldn't have been a decision in 2015. And I don't think that the sign code would have still been adjusted or moderated to account for digital signs with or without the Supreme Court case. I am a little frustrated that, that the school district, at least 3 prior boards to this sitting board, has exhibited extreme patience on this subject. And I know that it sounds odd for us to go on at length about this issue, but it is an issue of communication. It is an issue of community pride. It's an issue of school pride. But there are specific dimensions around this. 6 years of waiting for a sign means that we have impacted 10,000 unique students at Westerville South. We have limited the opportunity to communicate with 10,000 unique students over that 6-year period. More importantly, if we include families, we're now talking over 50% of the city of Westerville's population has been unable to see what's going on in their community because of first inadequate signage and then no signage. This is a community impact. And I think that we have shown a huge degree of patience and willingness to compromise as a school board and the successive school boards before us, and we've got no sign. I mean, I am outcome and evidence-based. Regardless of what the reasons are, there is 0 sign. And that's not an acceptable solution for our school, for our community, for our parents, for our staff. And we have heard about it in very pointed terms from our community. So I would also state that my expectation is that at this point, given 6 years of working through partnership with the city, that at this time, we will move forward with a variance request for both electronic and at a minimum a return to 21 square feet or parity at 23 square feet with the other signs in the school district. Any additional questions or comments?
Just wondering what the regulations are for temporary digital signs. build a nice little covering around it. It's temporary. Trot it from one side of the yard to the other.
I do have one last thing. Jeff, you've worked so hard on this. Thank you for a long time.
Welcome.
Thanks again, Jeff. Appreciate the update.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move off to our next agenda topic, which is public comments 6.01. This evening, we do have a citizen that has signed up, Peg Duffy. And just a reminder that you'll have 5 minutes to address the board. And please remember to address the agenda item that you're referencing at the beginning of your comments. The timer will be shown on the screen, so Mr. Hershiser will call time when 5 minutes has elapsed. Please address your comments to the board and not to the audience.
My comments relate to agenda item 12.01, transfer of territory from Columbus City School District to the Westerville School District. Last fall, I asked that the board start talking about win-win. I was told, don't talk about it until next year, new board, when it will be up. Well, obviously, this relates to win-win. There seem to be loopholes in win-win. There are things there that we must not have thought about before, and I would urge our district, rather than spending a lot of money in litigation on this particular item, that we spend the money in cooperation with other districts to look at what are these things we never thought about before that could occur. This must be like Swiss cheese, all kinds of holes there. There was a transfer from Southwestern to Upper Arlington School District that was permitted, obviously to the advantage of the developer. And so I urge you to start talking about win-win soon, that this case points out to us there are all kinds of things that could be out there in the wings that we haven't thought about. Thank you.
Thank you, Peg. Move to agenda item 7.01. Need to secure a motion for a resolution to approve the financial reports and investments as of January 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Bart, will you call the roll?
Can we review them first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I was all excited that I called a motion right the first time.
Sorry about that. For the general fund, year-to-date receipts, fiscal year-to-date receipts, there's $94.4 million. Year-to-date expenditures are $88.6 million. The unencumbered fund balance is $62.1 million for the general fund. When you look at all funds, our year-to-date receipts are $129.2 million. Our year-to-date expenditures are $129.3 million. Our unencumbered fund balance is $76.1 million. That's the end of my report.
Excellent. Any questions about the financials? If not, Bart, will you call the roll?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes. Next, we'll move to agenda item 8, personnel consent agenda. Seeking a motion for the review of 8.01 to 8.07.
So moved.
Second.
And tonight we have a few.
Good evening, President Byrd, members of the board. Tonight's consent agenda contains 7 sections involving 45 persons. Section 8.01 is the resignation of 4 classified staff. 8.02 is resignation of 1 teacher. 8.03 is a change of assignment for 3 classified staff and 2 temporary changes of assignment. 8.04 is contractual status change for 5 classified staff members. 8.05 is leave of absence for 3 teachers. 8.06 is employment of 3 classified staff. And 8.07 is a variety of supplemental and hourly contracts for licensed staff, including our summer school principal and coordinators. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions this evening? Hearing none, if you call the roll, Bart.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes. Next on our agenda this evening is a motion to approve the final reading of new policy 260.02, single general class activities. If I can have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
And do we have an update on this? Any questions from first reading? If not, Bart, will you call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes. Next agenda item 9.02, final reading for the deletion of policy 2423, school to work program. If I can have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any additional questions, comments, or issues related to this deletion? If not, Bart, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes. And our final consent, policy consent item this evening is motion to approve for final reading of revised policy 5830, student fundraising. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Questions, concerns, comments, or issues related to this motion?
Yes. This policy contains requirements that the federal government says we must comply with. And these requirements from the USDA significantly intrude into the rights, well, not the rights, significantly intrude into the abilities of our booster groups, our parent groups, our student groups, in addition to the related policies that we will return to at another point in time that significantly intrude into our abilities to self-govern. Now, the feds say we have to have these policies in place, and we have to demonstrate compliance. We apparently in Ohio do not have waivers put into place to allow differences from this policy as regards various fundraisers and so forth that our boosters, our families, our students may wish to participate in. So this is something that it's kind of ironic. You ask us to vote on policies, federal government, and require our vote to be a yes. And if we don't do it, then the threat is to withhold federal dollars. So I really want to vote no on all these policies that have anything to do with the requirements that take away our ability to govern. If I do that, and the federal government decides to make, or if we were to do that, my one vote wouldn't do anything. But if we were all to say no to these kind of policies, and for some reason, the federal government decided to make an example of the Westerville City Schools, as has happened in other districts in other departments of the federal government, then I could effectively be jeopardizing the ability to feed our students. This isn't fair. This seems like a little bitty policy that isn't that big a deal. This is a big deal to me. I really don't like it. I don't like having my hands tied behind my back as regards what I can do for and with my school district. I don't like tying our parents' hands, our boosters' hands, our students' hands. And yet I can't say I'm going to take away the opportunity to feed students if the federal government were to decide to make an issue of it. So I'm going to vote yes only because I don't trust the federal government not to make an issue of it and not to create damage for my children in this school district. There.
Something you said, something you just said, if the state were to have a variance, that would come into play, that could come into play here, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I think, you know, we read this stuff and talk about it beforehand, right? You know, we do, okay. I say that somewhat facetiously, but this really is interesting that we dive into this. So maybe what we would want to do
Get the state to give a variance.
is, yes, to our audience of parents and community members and so on, say, we are going to vote for this because feeding our students and those dollars matter. and they come with some strings, and a lot of things come with strings. I get that. But I guess I would dovetail on and say, if you, audience, are concerned about this, I would encourage you to do some letter writing, some phone calling to state and say, we just think your state, we need to look at a possibility of a variance for
Yeah.
future. So that's what, you had said, you
Yes.
said that, and I
Yes,
thought,
I did.
oh, maybe that's a.
There are other states that have enacted variances. And it isn't like a variance for Westerville, it's a variance overall.
Right.
And other states have permitted varying degrees, varying numbers of fundraisers that can be held that are not going to be held to these various policies. And Ohio did not choose to do that. Now, whether they can do it still, that I don't know. But it would really be helpful and a very good idea to reach out to the interim state superintendent and to reach out legislatively and say, hey, this isn't the way we want things to be. This isn't fair to our own community and our own ability to make our own decisions, and see what we can do. Because the Board of Education's hands have those strings wrapped around them.
Because of our care for the kids.
Exactly.
That's it. I'm sorry.
That is, but you're absolutely
okay.
right.
Sorry. Yes.
So John, who polices this?
We do. The
We have an audit.
expectation, so the process, as I understand it to date, is that as part of the state audit, which we're the front end of with the state on our food service program, requires providing documentation that you're in compliance with all of the policy requirements. So if you don't produce record of that, then you're out of compliance.
So,
Now, once it's in place, there's the enforcement of, did you pass the policy? Then there's the enforcement of who's selling what to kids and when.
right.
Right.
I
So
mean,
individual buildings would be responsible because they are now charged by your passing the policy, they are charged with supervising the implementation of that policy.
And we're not condoning any,
I say, I am not telling those buildings to break the policies.
no, we.
I
That
didn't
is
say
certainly a
that.
slippery slope.
I didn't say that.
I know
I
you
just
didn't.
was
No,
asking
no.
who they should watch out for,
This is
right?
informational purposes
That's it.
only.
Right.
I will personally test all cookie sales beforehand, and I'll make
30
sure that they're
minutes
nutritious.
before and after school though,
Yes.
right? You can't-
And school
It's,
starts at
school
midnight.
starts at midnight the
Night.
night before
Yeah.
and ends 1/2 hour. So it changes what's considered the school day for the purpose of the sale and requires you to be in compliance with certain nutritional guidelines as set forth. The other part of this story, I hate to add to this one, in talking to Carrie Dennis, who manages our food service, I talked to her about this because she talked to the state, and it appears as a modification to the whole thing coming, not in terms of what defines the school day, which might be the most annoying part of the whole thing for me, but in terms of this compliance with USDA, I forgot the wording here, there's some other wording that sounds a little bit more flexible. But
Yeah, and I think that's what's frustrating here, obviously, is that having lots of friends in the legal community, they taught me something a long time ago. A badly written law is a law that yields unintended consequences, right? And one of the bad habits that we have both in our federal and state legislature is that there is sometimes such a rush to push legislation through the pipeline that our legislators, and if they're honest with you, and they're honest with themselves, they'll say that they do this quite frequently, which is they push law through their chambers and say, it's a little dirty and it's a little fuzzy, but it'll get cleaned up when we get to administrative law. And a lot of times that doesn't happen. In this case, this is a great example of where that has not happened, particularly if the feds are relying on the states to generate the exemption or exception processes in additional laws, right? Which is just going to create additional unintended consequences. Bad law is bad law. This is a bad law. The intent is good. We want good, healthy food options for our kids, right? I'm surprised that we don't have fundraising corporations around the country that are driving their own lobbyists into D.C. to have this fixed, because this has a potential huge economic impact on, you know, the Otis Spunkmeyers. And I'm not advertising anybody, by the way. The kids aren't selling anything currently. But any of those companies are going to experience an economic impact from, again, badly written law. I think the worst thing about this whole thing is that it puts the school board not just in the situation of having to approve something that, you know, we're fundamentally in disagreement with, so that we do not jeopardize, you know, food programs for our most needy, you know, citizens and students. But it puts us in a situation to have, you know, the conversations about, well, what if we didn't enforce it, right? And those are credibility and integrity issues that no school board, no elected body should have to be discussing because the feds wrote a bad law, right? And that's just the reality of where we sit with this thing. And I know it seems like a small item, but there are more of these in our pipeline currently that we have to bring back around and approve. And we'll have to wait for the state to, you know, get the wherewithal to unwind them, you know, or make changes or amendments or fixes from a process standpoint, and hope that it gets sorted out correctly. And I don't think that that's an effective way to govern. I think it is abdicating responsibility at the federal and state level. And I'm certainly hoping that our state legislators that we're friends with, you know, from a jurisdiction and a school board standpoint, that they step up to the plate and put some solutions in place for this. Any additional comments, questions, or issues? If not, Bart, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson,
Yep. Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes. Moving to our next agenda item, recommended action on old business, agenda item 10. We have none this evening. Recommended action item, new business, agenda item 11. We have none this evening. Move to recommended action, standing business for February 22nd, resolution to not accept the transfer of the Kinlan-Columbus territory. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, concerns, updates? If not, Bart, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes. Moving to agenda item 12.02, motion to approve 2 overnight out-of-state field trips, although I believe we had 3. So 3 overnight out-of-state field trips. Oh, one's in-state, my apologies. So a motion to approve 2 overnight out-of-state field trips. May I have
So
a motion,
moved.
please? Yeah.
Second.
Any questions or issues? I'm just extremely jealous of the varsity baseball team. Not only going to Orlando, but getting to go to the Wide World of Sports Complex, which is awesome.
I'm chaperone.
Nice. All right, hearing no additional questions or concerns, if you'll call the roll, please, Bart.
Ms. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes. Moving to agenda item 13.01, public comment. We have no one signed up this evening for public comment, so we will move to agenda item 14, board comments. Who would like to start?
Sure. I want to address Peg's comments just very briefly. I do think it's important to look at the exceptions in win-win as we go forward as a district, because there are some certain exceptions in win-win that are laid out to provide the opportunities for people to petition to be annexed and so forth. There are not a lot of exceptions in win-win, and they're laid out pretty clearly. And what you saw us do tonight was continue to protect the boundaries of our district in many ways by upholding what we do. I think what I have seen happening. This is my night to rail at other bodies. I think that what I've seen happen recently with the Upper Arlington piece and this one parcel piece is an interesting approach on the part of members of the State Board of Education that I will be following up with some of them to be talking about, which is their understanding of what win-win actually is and what the benefit of win-win is to the districts that are part of it, and why win-win matters now, just as it mattered in, you know, the 1980s and the 1990s and the first years of this particular century. Win-win matters. Win-win is important for our district. There are some exceptions that are built into the agreement, and it is important for us to police the attempt to exert those exceptions, and important for us to continue to defend and strengthen this district's boundaries and our internal operations within those.
I'm going to go real quick. So I kept telling you guys the bowl-a-thon was coming up, but it's passed now, and it was a huge success. They raised about $42,000. They had the most executive bowlers ever at 46, and for the first time in history, someone bowled a perfect game, and it was not Dr. Kellogg. So
121's not a perfect game?
21, you mean?
I believe it was Westerville Center.
Woo-woo. It's on their, oh. Okay. I guess I have one other real quick thing. Oh, you're fine. All-day kindergarten applications are available, and so are magnet school applications. That's it.
I have no comments tonight, thank you.
In this section of our agenda, our printed agenda up here, it says the goal of these board comments for community, parents, students, and staff engaged as partners. It says partners in education. In my role in kind of community engagement, I'm very sad because there are a few families in our district that have had a tear in their soul. We've lost some. We've lost some people, and Aiden Welling is a student at Whittier. And when a child dies, there's a tear in certainly in the family. And but I know our teachers and our staff well enough to know that there's a hole in the fabric of those folks' lives. And so I may get one of those emails that say I'm mixing church and state, but I know that my prayers, and I suspect our prayers, are with those folks. The Downard family, to let them know that we are and will continue to walk with them, whatever they will be facing down the road. And again, the students that are around the students in that family, and certainly the teachers that will be trying to, as Mr. Byrd knows, when there's a loss of a life in a family, the teachers and staff tend to rally around and try to support those who are still here. there's another child at Whittier, Vandenover, and I believe I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. Her mother passed away. This is a fifth grader. So I, in my role is community engagement. I just try to a little bit of represent our heart up here with these lives. And so I don't need to tell you, you all are good people. You know how to support, you know how to love, you know how to write notes, you know how to rally around. I will say one thing. In my real life, I call my pastoral life my real life. In my 36 years of ministry, I have discovered this very clearly. You need to support people now in the crisis of pain. But what people really need is for you to journey with them through the next weeks and months, and to make sure that we stand by them. And so simply representing our hearts to whoever hears any of this, please know that we talk about a lot of things up here. We stomp our feet about signs and the feds. We do all kinds of things that I am just way beyond honored to do. And I am honored to represent us in saying, you are a part of our family, and we will support you. Students, teachers, staff, as you go through this time.
Thank you, Rick. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I will just say that, personal experience informs me that one of the things to be proudest about in our district is that we are a community, and our community does an outstanding job of coming behind families that have suffered loss. And I think that your call out about teachers and administration is spot on. I am just always amazed now to see the reaction and the responsiveness of our school staff, our community, our parents in these situations. So thank you, I appreciate that. Just a quick update on liaison responsibilities. We've talked about this for the past few weeks, and we've been able to settle on those liaison positions. Our human resources liaison will be Jerry Cotter. I will continue to hold facilities and operations as we're going through our activities with Point View and those types of projects. I want to make sure that we're maintaining continuity. Finance will be Tracy Davidson. Curriculum will continue to be Nancy Nestor-Baker, and community engagement will continue to be Rick Villardo. The only additional change would be that Nancy and I will split legislative liaison duties, mainly because of both our personal interest in legislation as well as our contacts within the legislative community, both federal and state. And those will be our liaison responsibilities for this school board year. One final note as we move to adjournment this evening, relative to the Westerville South sign. The one thing that I would ask us to consider as a community when we think about the Westerville South sign is first of all how proud we are, I know I am, of Westerville City. And to be honest, Westerville City and our city manager and our city council for the amazing things that they've done. Our Gateway project, our Polaris project, really the transformation in the last 5 years of the city has been stunning, other than the large gaping holes and steel plates that we're currently dealing with, that'll be around for a little bit. But even that's going to be a tremendous improvement to our infrastructure in our city. But I struggle with the fact that in 6 years, how many signs have been built? How many signs have been built at businesses and and churches and other locations, but more importantly, all of Westerville City's monument signs at the Gateway and on Polaris got built, and Westerville South's did not. So I think that that's something that I hope the community takes into consideration in speaking with our city government. With that being said, dates and times and locations for our next meetings. The board will meet in regular session on Monday, March 7th, 2016, and March 21st, 2016, at 6 p.m. at the Early Learning Center at 936 East Wind Drive. And with that, if I can entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Bart, will you call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes, and I'll remember the gavel to close the session.